Welcome summoners to the Yokai Battle tutorial. Yokai Battle is a 2 to 4 player competitive game where players will be taking the role of summoners who call upon the powers of yokai to capture terrain tiles on the board. Each player will take a different color deck that all have the same cards. There are two ways to play the game. There is the Apprentice mode, which makes use of 22 monster cards, and the Expert mode, which adds in 18 action cards and 6 new monsters that you can replace within the 22 monster deck, making a singular deck of 40 cards in total. For this demonstration, I will simply be showing you a 2-player game using the Apprentice rules, and then afterwards I'll explain how the Expert cards work. So, to set up the battlefield, in a 2-player game, you will take 2 copies of all the 5 elements from the box and shuffle them up, making a 3x3 square. If you are playing with 3 players, you will take 3 copies of the 5 elements, shuffle them up, and make a 3x4 square. And if you're playing with 4 players, you will take all the elements and shuffle them up to make a 4x4 square. There is an extra tile in the box that is used to place the chakra counter. In a 2-player game, this will simply be set off to the side. In a 3-player game, this will be the top left corner in your 3x4 square, and in a 4-player game, it will take the same spot in your 4x4 square. As you're making your battlefield, any tiles that are not used in your formation are simply put back into the box. To finish the setup, you will take the chakra dial and place it onto the chakra tile with the number 2 under the arrow. Once the battlefield is set up, each player will shuffle their 22 cards and draw the top 5. If in your hand of 5 you do not have 2 cards worth 1 chakra, then you will draw another 5 cards. So for example, this player here has not drawn any cards worth 1, so they will draw 5 more cards. This is known as the opening ritual. With the added 5 cards, they now have a minimum of 2 cards worth 1 chakra, and they are ready to start. The oldest player will go first. On your turn, you can summon up to a maximum of 2 monsters and attack with as many monsters as you can afford to on the field. So let's take a look at a card's anatomy. In the top left, you will see the card's attribute, matching one of the symbols here on the tiles. Beside that, you will see the card's chakra cost. Below that, you will see the card's life point value, or LP. And along the edges, you will see the card's attack points, or AP. When you place a monster onto the field, you will also determine its facing. Once a monster has been placed, it cannot change its facing, unless a specific card says otherwise, but those cards only exist in the master play. So you can summon a monster on any tile here on the field. However, if you have an elemental monster, it will receive either bonuses or penalties based on what tile you place it on. If you place it on a tile matching its element, it will receive 2 bonuses. The first will be that its life points is increased by 1. Whenever you summon a monster, you will also take a life point counter dial, placing it under to show how many life points the monster has. So if I were to place this onto the metal tile, it would then increase its life points by 1, bringing it to 2. The second bonus that a yokai gets for being placed on favorable terrain is that it has access to its special ability. The special abilities are here in the center of the card, and below that, of course, is the name. If you place a monster on an unfavorable tile, which is anything that does not match its attribute, it will receive 2 penalties. First, it will not have access to its special ability, and second, it will instead lose 1 life point. So if you were to try and place this Onikuma here onto an unfavorable terrain, it would lose 1 life point, thereby destroying it as soon as it hit the ground. So to avoid that, you would want to place this on favorable terrain. But you are welcome to send stronger monsters on unfavorable terrain, for they will survive the penalties. Lastly, there are colorless monsters who have no attribute, and they will receive no penalties or bonuses for being placed on any terrain. However, they will always have access to their special ability. So let's talk about special abilities in detail here. In the box, you will have these handy reference cards that show you all the abilities in the basic play. But here's how they can kind of break down for you to understand them when they get more complicated. On the leftmost symbol, this shows when an ability is triggered. In these examples, the leftmost says it is triggered when the monster is summoned. Beside that, this ability is triggered when the monster is defeated. And beside that, this ability is triggered as long as the monster is alive. So next to the first symbol, you will find what the actual ability is. Beside that, you will see who the ability affects. And beside that, on the far right, you will see any restrictions, if any, to that ability. So for example here, this fire ability. This ability will trigger when the monster dies. It'll subtract 1 life point from an enemy monster within 1 square. That's how you read these abilities. But these handy reference cards are good to keep by because abilities can get a little more complicated. So this tracker dial, of course, will keep track of how many points each player has to spend. If you don't spend your full tracker points available to you, they will not track into the next turns. And at the end of your turn, you will draw a card. If by the end of your turn after drawing a card you have less than 5 cards, you may draw up to 5 cards. To win this game, you must take control of 5 tiles. If by the time you place your 5th monster and it survives its summoning, you will win the game. Which is why you only have 4 life point trackers. So going to the opponent's turn here, they will summon their monsters as normal, keeping into account favorable terrain and all that. When a monster is summoned, it will immediately attack an adjacent enemy. If a monster has multiple options to pick from, it will simply pick one of the 2, or one of many. So here, the second player will summon this monster onto their favorable terrain, receive their bonuses, and then do their summoning attack. Summoning attacks only work in the up, down, left, right orientation. Diagonals do not count. And you will simply refer to their attack points in that direction. Here, the Sakura has an attack point value toward the north of 2, and the Onikuma has an attack point value of 1 going south. So they will simultaneously attack each other. Now normally this would kill the Onikuma, except that his special ability says that whenever he attacks, he will reduce the AP by 1 of an enemy. So when these 2 attack, he actually only deals 1 damage. He will simply take the dials and move them to reflect their new health values. Now let's say we chose to do something a little bit differently here. Let's say instead we decided to place ourselves like this for whatever reason, so that the attack point was going to go in this direction to this monster here. They would attack each other, dealing damage, and let's say this monster here had 1 life point left. This player, instead of summoning another monster, could instead choose to spend their chakra in different ways. As I mentioned, you can also spend it to attack with monsters already on the field. In order to do that, you will spend chakra points equal to the attack points which you would use in the attack. So what does that mean? So if I wanted this monster to attack again, and attack in this direction, I would spend 1 chakra point for this AP. If the monster was in this direction and I wanted to attack, I would have to spend 2 chakra points. And you would simply keep track of this number in your mind, for this dial will change at the end of the round once all players have had a turn. And those are the basics of the game. At the end of your turn, you will draw your card again, and if you have less than 5, you are welcome to draw another card. However, you must also keep in mind that you can lose if you run out of cards. As the game keeps going on in rounds, you'll be able to summon stronger and stronger monsters to fend off your foes. The game is won once one player has control of 5 terrain tiles or has caused their opponent to run out of cards in their deck. Now, what about expert play? So expert play introduces 18 more cards. In here you will find traps, equipment, and spells. Spells can be played at any point during your turn. You will simply pay the cost and activate its ability. Equipment also works in the same way. You'll simply pay the cost and attach it to a monster that's already on the field, and it will act as if it has the bonuses printed on the card. Now, traps. You'll pay the cost and place these cards face down on empty tiles. Whenever any monster is summoned onto it, even your own, if they happen to survive being summoned, they will trigger the trap, flipping it over and activating its ability, which may or may not kill the monster or have it suffer penalties which will incur for the rest of the game. So if you're placing down traps on the board fairly often, it might deter your opponents or even yourself from placing monsters onto these tiles. The problem is, if you can trigger your own traps, how do you prevent that from blowing up in your face? Well, you can spend 2 chakra to instead pick up a trap you've already placed down. It takes careful planning to make sure that your traps are used effectively and to make sure you're pushing your opponent into a corner. Another mechanic introduced in the expert play is when you're drawing cards. As I mentioned, at the end of your turn you'll draw a card, and if you have less than 5 cards, you can draw up to 5. However, if after that you still don't like your hand, you are welcome to discard as many cards as you would like from your hand to draw that many from the deck. It's a good way to kind of cycle out cards you may not like or don't need, but you must also take into account that you can also lose if you run out of cards. Now, I also mentioned the expert deck here has 8 new cards for you to play with. However, your monster deck can only consist of 22 monsters, so you are free to exchange these monsters with the ones in the standard deck, making a unique deck to yourself, but still maintaining a lot of similarities with your opponents. How you choose to customize your deck is completely up to you. In the end, your expert deck will be consisting of 40 cards. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. Yokai Battle is a game that I even backed myself on Kickstarter, which is why I have these expert cards. As you can see here in the bottom, I don't know whether or not these expert cards will be made available to the public retail anytime soon. I also have to give a shout out to the guys who made this, especially Leon Eugen, who helped me design my own card for this game. Yep, that's me, Andrew no Yurei. I'm a Shogi Ghost player, and it was a lot of fun talking to the guys to help design this card, and he was very receptive to the feedback I gave him. So if you're looking for a really cool strategy game, check out Yokai Battle. The art on these cards is beautiful, and I'm not just saying that because I'm one of them. That's all for now. Let's keep on rolling.